Hello, this is Victor Davis Hanson. I'm alone today for our interview on our podcast with Senator John Kennedy. I thought I'd cut right to the quick. Senator, you have a distinguished law degree from the University of Virginia, another law degree from Magdalen College at Oxford. What do you make of this question we're having? And you've been quite, I thought, astute about it. Article 6, the Supremacy Clause. It seems to me that the federal government is trying to enforce something that's pretty clearly a federal matter, that is immigration. And we've got the Chicago police force not, I guess you would say, not responding to a call. We have governors and mayors who are actively urging people to resist federal law, even to make sanctuary areas where the federal government cannot go. Where's this all going to lead if we're not careful?
Well, first, Professor, it's an honor to get to talk to you. I follow everything you speak and write.
Thank
and
you.
my wife, Becky's even a bigger fan. It is clear to me, after going through 4 years of this with President Biden, that the Democratic Party today believes that vetting people at the border is racist. I think it's prudent, but there's no doubt in my mind. Some will say it, others try to mask it, but that they just believe in open borders. Now, that is their privilege, their right as an American to believe that, but they can't not follow the law, and the law is very clear. And most Americans. They look at the southern border like they look at their front door. Most Americans lock their front door at night. They don't do that because they hate everybody on the outside. They do that because they love the people on the inside and they want to know who's coming in and out of their house. And so you can be both for legal immigration and against illegal immigration without being inconsistent. I've just finally concluded that the Democrats, they'd be much more honest intellectually if they'd just say, we don't think there ought to be borders. And you see it in their attitude about sanctuary cities. What they're doing, Professor, is clearly illegal, as you pointed out, the Supremacy Clause.
We've had that in our past with South Carolina in 1832, and then events where states said that federal laws did not apply to them or federal property even. That was
Sure.
The precursor. Are you worried that we're getting inch by inch closer to some kind of, I don't know, what would be the word? I don't think we're going to have a John Brown raid anywhere, but who knows? I mean, we seem like we're getting to that they know that what they're doing is wrong, and yet they feel they have the moral high ground to go ahead and do that legal wrong.
And you're entitled under our Constitution to think the law is immoral. You still have to follow it.
Yeah.
And if I were king for a day, I'm not, and I don't aspire to be, I would do just what the Trump administration is doing. I would enforce the law. I would send in ICE agents, and I would offer to these mayors and governors who clearly have a crime problem, particularly in urban areas. I would offer to also send in law enforcement personnel to help them with their crime problem. I just can't. If I were mayor of a major city today, or the governor of a state with a crime problem, I would welcome additional law enforcement help. And it is a mystery to me why the Democrats won't accept it, except that anything President Trump is for, they're against.
Yeah.
If President Trump came out in favor of breathing to survive, the Democrats would hold their breath. I mean, it's gotten that bad.
What would happen? I mean, we've had an order to the Chicago police not to protect ICE agents that were blockaded. One of the people who was conducting that blockade had a semi-automatic rifle.
Yeah.
Arrested. What happens if Mayor Johnson or someone of that extreme viewpoint actually says that I'm going to use law enforcement to stop ISIS? Then you've got something that we've never really encountered in our recent history, have we?
It would be unprecedented,
Yes,
and it would be foolish.
it
It
would
would
be
be.
foolish.
I've got I've got I've got rocks in my driveway that are dumber than that. Um, but if he
Everybody,
did it, we would have to enforce federal law because federal law is under the supremacy clause law that controls, and they're federal statutes.
was that always a revelation that we're putting people in the judiciary that don't really know the Constitution?
I was constantly shocked, and I tried to be bipartisan. We rejected a handful of President Trump's nominees, but not in every case. But I would say, Professor, in 70% of the cases, President Biden's nominees were activists first and lawyers second. They really had no courtroom experience. They hadn't really thought about the law. And I've said repeatedly to both sides, being a federal judge is a serious thing. You have enormous power. And just because you've seen my cousin Vinny does not qualify you to be a federal judge. For one thing, you got to know the law.
Yeah.
And just basic provisions of law, like the United States Constitution. It was clear to me that a lot of them had never read it.
I was brought up in a Democratic family. My siblings are Democrats, and you were legal counsel for Governor Romer. Is that how you pronounce it, Romer?
Romer, yes.
Yes. And you've had a long service as the state treasurer of Louisiana. What do you think was a turning point in the Democratic Party that made them go, and is it with the Squad, the AOC, the Jasmine Cross, this radical environmentalism, radical transgender? So, these 30, 70 issues they're on, is it the hatred of Trump? Was it building under Obama? What's your diagnosis that happened to this party?
I think it was President Obama. I think there's always been a struggle within the Democratic Party. There's one within the Republican Party, but particularly within the Democratic Party, between what I call the loon wing or the socialist wing and traditional Democrats. President Clinton, rather, brought the Democratic Party back into the mainstream. That's why he was elected twice. President Obama, he moved the party further to the left. He couldn't go as far left as he wanted to, in my judgment, Professor, but he moved it as far as he could. And then President Biden was elected, and most people, I think, who voted for President Biden thought they were getting the second coming of Bill Clinton. Instead, they got the second cousin of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Because so many of President Obama's people were in the White House. And for many of them, it was like a third term. And that's where they came up. And then they allowed the woke wing, the loon wing, if you will, of the party. You had people in the White House who felt nothing but contempt for America. They should have felt gratitude, but they felt contempt for America. You had folks advising the president who think that children should be able to change genders at recess.
Yeah.
It was just extraordinary, and that's one of the reasons the Democrats lost the election.
Sort of like the third term that Obama wanted to push that agenda without his fingerprints on it, and that's what he did. You were invited into the White House to talk to Joe Biden. His aides wanted you, kind of grabbed your arm and wanted you out, but you cleverly just said, when he asked you, you want to see the cabinet room, that you were able to extend that visit to 30 or 40 minutes. But you noticed at that time things that bothered you about his physical or mental capacity. And was it your impression that the people around him knew as well as you did from that what was going on?
Oh, yes. I met with President Biden during the midway through his first year rather. I was probably the only Republican, and very few Democrats for that matter, who ever spent more than 5 minutes with the president. I spent about 40 minutes with him at a bipartisan bill signing, and it was just he and I. And I purposely stayed, ignoring instructions from staff to leave, because I wanted to get a firsthand look at him. Mm-hmm. He was very affable. He was very old. We all age differently, Professor. Yeah. President Biden was He was old for.
Well, the way I see it, Professor HANSON and I could have talked all day, but let me just tell you straight what I told him. After 4 years of watching President Biden and his merry band of wokesters, I've come to one conclusion. The modern Democratic Party believes that vetting people at the border is racist. I think it's prudent. They believe in open borders. I believe in locked doors. Now, most Americans I know, they lock their front doors at night, not because they hate everybody outside, but because they love the people inside. You can believe in legal immigration and still oppose illegal immigration. That's not hypocrisy. That's common sense. But right now, the Democrats are running sanctuary cities where the law doesn't apply, where the federal government can't even walk in the door. That's not just bad policy. That's illegal under the supremacy clause of our Constitution. If I were king for a day, I'd do one simple thing: enforce the law. I'd send ICE agents to do their jobs, and I'd send help to mayors and governors who've let crime turn their cities into war zones. But the trouble is, if President Trump's for it, the Democrats are against it. If he said, "breathe to survive," they'd hold their breath just to prove a point. Now, I've been around Washington long enough to see a lot of dumb ideas, but some of what I'm seeing lately, well, I've got rocks in my driveway that are smarter than that. You can't run a country by feelings. You've got to run it by law. And if you don't like the law, you can try to change it, but you still have to follow it. That's what the Constitution says. That's what Article 6 says. That's what America says. I'll tell you something else that ought to worry everybody. We've got a Justice Department and an FBI that have gotten way too comfortable peeking into the lives of people they don't like. We just found out that a special counsel got the phone records of 8 sitting United States senators. 8, without notice, without explanation. That's not oversight, that's overreach, and the phone companies just handed them over like they were giving out Halloween candy. Well, I can promise you this: they're going to have to answer for it. I intend to find out who authorized it, why it was done, and why nobody thought the American people deserved to know. Now, some people ask me, "Senator, how did the Democratic Party get this way?" I think it started with President Obama. Bill Clinton pulled his party back to the middle. That's why he won twice. But Obama moved them left, and Biden, well, most Americans thought they were voting for the second coming of Bill Clinton. Instead, they got the second cousin of Bernie Sanders. The real power in that party isn't President Biden. It isn't Chuck Schumer. It's the Lun wing, the socialist, woke wing led by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. And the rest of them, they're scared to death of her. They know better, but they won't say a word. They're like possums at a gun range, frozen stiff, waiting for someone else to move first. And that's how you end up with a government that thinks it's virtuous to defy its own laws, censor its own people, and surveil its own senators. I met with President Biden early in his term. Nice man, old man. He was old for his years, affable, but tired, wanted to tell war stories and go to bed early. You didn't need a medical degree to see what was going on. What I saw then has only gotten worse, and the folks around him knew it. They covered for him because the alternative was admitting that no one was really in charge. These days I tell folks back home, whoever controls that teleprompter, that's who's running the country. But I'll tell you something, and I mean it. I'm an optimist. A paranoid optimist maybe, but an optimist all the same. I believe America's future can be better than our past, if we just get the pigs out of the creek, and clean up the water in Washington. You can't drain a swamp when the alligators are running the pump. You've got to have courage, law, and a little bit of humility. And if we remember who we are, one nation under God, ruled by law, not by mobs, built on common sense and education, then I believe our best days are still ahead. That's what I think, and that's what I'll keep saying, even if I'm the last guy in the room saying it.